Hey guys, this is Tom Box, and I got a question for you. And I wanted to talk to you guys about this for some time now, and that has got to be, did hand traps ruin Yu-Gi-Oh? Or is it an indicator of something else? That's my question. I think it's the second part. I think it's the latter, to be honest. But I think it also contributes to some of the issues that we're experiencing right now in the format. Seeing that some people are quitting because like, oh, the format is really rough, and I can tell you, tournament turnout has been at an all-time low in my area. It is an indicator of something because oh, I just don't want to play in a format where I'm just hand checking against my opponent. Oh, I'm not playing the best deck, and therefore it's just a very tough time to play. Then let's look into how hand traps are actually kind of part of the issue, or rather how you can use hand traps as a bit of an indicator. Now, I want to give you guys the past, the present, and then we'll go into the future. The past, look, I've been playing this game for a very long time. I played it without synchros. I played the game without, all this extra deck stuff back in the day when it was still called the fusion deck, all right? I'm an old player. And the only hand traps people even played back then was Karibo. And those were the casuals. Casuals played Karibo because it blocked a hit. Just play Wabaku, you noob. The real competitive instance of a hand trap being useful, for me anyway, was during Teledad format when Gores was released in that really weird pack. Open boards, you can swing in, and all of a sudden, you would be facing down a 27 beater, which would be stronger than your Stardust Dragon, and you would be risking your entire board being destroyed by battle. Okay, then there's Gorge Tragodia, Battle Fader, Swift Scarecrow. These were all battle-related disruptions from hand. I'm going to call them disruption from hand trap. I'm going to intermix it because you guys call it hand traps. I have to call it disruption from hand. For this video, I'm going to call it hand traps. That was the pre-era. I would say that was the pre-era. Then we go into Effect Veiler, Ghost Ogre Maxi, Drone Lockbird. That would be the next early phase of the next era, where you can kind of tell why they're getting more and more powerful. Back then, everything was battle related. The battle phase was one of the most important phase. But now we get into like Effect Veiler, Ogre, Maxi. Maxi and Droll, those two, they weren't actually played that often back in the day. It didn't really matter too much because people actually weren't spamming summoning that hard. But both of these cards were beyond their time. All right, and then we finally get into like Ash Blossom, Imperm, Mourner, Sister, Ghost Sisters, all the Ghost Girls. Those are like, hey, we need to prevent the board from being developed. That is what it's telling us. Like, these are cards that you play so that your opponent cannot develop the board. And so eventually we get to Phantasme, Nibiru, Shifter, Bystials. Not only are we disrupting them, we are summoning big monsters along the way as if they were kind of like Gores and Dragodia, stuff like that. So what happened there? What happened in each of those eras? It's an indicator of how fast Yugioh has gotten, right? You have Karibo and Necomani King, really slow, no one really plays it. Then you get to like DD Crow, Tragodia. Well, Battle Phase was the most important thing because we didn't have 50 different ways to negate the monster effect. Oh, Baron, just negating stuff nonstop, which made a lot of those hand traps essentially just obsolete, right? We want to build into these big monsters. And because these big monsters exist, we have to play into them. And so we want to disrupt them, we want to stop them. All right, so that's kind of where it's led to. And Drone Lockbird, back in the day, we didn't search like more than like once or twice a turn. So Drone Lockbird essentially was just for like the odd player. But little did we know that we would be digging through our bulk to dig out this card during the Necros format. I think Necros and Dragon Ruler format. There's just so many formats where we needed this card because the opponent was just searching so many times. They're searching, they're drawing 6 cards. We need Drone Lockbird. That's kind of where it's led into. And the end boards are just so full of negation to the point where we need to answer the field. The game is getting so much faster. We went from back and forth to 2-card combos that don't even lead to an OTK, to like 2-card combos that will eventually lead to the OTK, and then we get to like now 1-card combos, and then we can now have 1-card combos that would have done like 4 negates. Now we get to 1-card combos that does like 7 bajillion things. That's where the speed of the game has gone, and hand traps have been kind of a clear indicator of, hey, the format is ridiculously fast. And if you look at our current format, we're looking at 20 hand traps in the main deck for a lot of the strongest players. And I've seen their deck list, all right? I've been sitting behind that counter and I get to read their deck list. And it is ridiculous on how many hand traps people play. If you're not playing hand trap, you're playing purely board breaking. You're playing snatch steal. You're playing mind controls. You're playing everything that would essentially make it so that whatever negation that your opponent has built, you get to take it for yourself and you get to use it against them to minimize the issue. Or you just don't let them play it all and you play a purely OTK. And that's just how modern Yu-Gi-Oh is. It really sped up time and time and time again to the point where the disruptions are getting more and more layered. And because Yu-Gi-Oh is a game that doesn't really do rotation, all the stuff that was broken that gets power crept eventually comes back and bite us, and that's kind of where it's led us to right now, and that's where we're into the modern day of hand trap. So let's look into the future hand traps, and that's going to be the Domino series and the Molcharmi. And I think each of these are trying to rip apart a different card. The one obvious one, let's start with that one, Molcharmi series. Those little jellyfishes, essentially Konami decided to defuse Maxi and treat each of the different special summon methods as a way to draw a card, rather than going straight for a blanket statement of all special summons. Sure, you can only activate one Maxi, but you get to cover all ground, from the deck, extra deck, from hand, from graveyard, from banish, whatever it is, you're drawing a card for each of those. And if you have a crazy combo deck, well, guess what? You're going to be burying yourself. Every single special summon digs you that much deeper into your own game loss, all right? So the new jellyfish defusing the Maxi into its parts. Right now we have two confirmed parts, Furuwas and we have Perulia. Perulia gives us a little bit a taste of something different. It affects the normal summon as well, which gives us more coverage because even modern day decks, we normal summon more than once now. We have decks that do that. We can just even look at, don't even look at for the Wonderies, look at Gimmick Puppet. They gain additional normal summons. Ritual Beast, additional normal summons. Like, you can see that the normal summon is now not just like a default game mechanic, but it's also a game mechanic that has been exploited via card effects as well. So this card here is a modern solution to a modern problem, I suppose. And so, sure, it's not as strong as Maxi. Yes, Perulia can be played around, but against certain decks, it doesn't make that much of a difference. I think that's kind of the point. And then there is Furuwas, which controls the special summons, or you draw cards for the main deck summons and the extra deck summons. I think this one's probably one of the most powerful, especially for anyone that's playing a modern day Yu-Gi-Oh deck, which utilizes like a very, very thick extra deck package, right? And in that case, yeah, it's probably going to be the one that people would probably choose to main deck, because who doesn't play with an extra deck? Most people do go into the extra deck a lot, or the main deck. You can look at like Snake Eyes, the Oak Effect or Ash Effect. There's just so much that comes straight from the deck as well. You're going to be able to draw cards. And let's do a little bit of the Maxi argument. Like, how many cards does a Maxi draw you? I guess back in the day, back when I still remember activating the card like in the Zodiac format, I remember like you get maybe about like 2 to 4 depending on how far your opponent extends. Like if they're really, really bad, they'll give you 4 cards. But essentially, just the 2 to 3 cards makes a whole lot of difference. It's like activating a Pot of Greed against your opponent, and drawing 2 to 3 cards is just that powerful. So you don't need to get like 50 bajillion cards in your hand. That's not necessary. Just the additional 3 will probably get you there and then some. So then there's probably going to be one more Molcharmi, right? The one that deals with the graveyard and the summoning from Banish. Once they have all 3, they got all the bases covered, and essentially Maxi is ready to be, well, shoved into the ban list. So we already know that Maxi is on the chopping block as long as we get the last and final Perulia, or maybe there's going to be even more, Molcharmi cards coming up. Who knows? If they do come up with more, well, Maxi's already not very safe. We have a replacement, and you're like, oh, why does this matter for us? Well, it's not really for us, it's for OCG, so that they don't have their brick of 10 cards that are going to shove into every single deck, all right? It's kind of like us. We have Ash Imperm Veiler as our default, or Ash Imperm Mourner as our default right now, which is okay. Or maybe it's Ash Imperm Mourner Nibiru. Like, you've got the odd combination of like a bunch of things that you just always put into your deck, and then you want to keep it as close to 40 as possible. I get it, but that also kind of makes it so that Yu-Gi-Oh is more of a game where you have to play the hand trap first, and it's just not very fun. I mean, we always talk about the Maxi minigame on Master Duel. Eventually, that's not gonna work. I think it's got impact the best of ones more than anything because like Maxi is just so good at giving you all that coverage, whereas the Molcharmies it can be a hit or miss. You just need to gain enough cards, and the Molcharmies they even come with like a little bit of drawback that if the board is empty and you drew too many cards, you have to randomly put cards back. So it might not be the best scenario, but I'm guessing they're trying to create little bits of like fail safe. And then there's the Domino series. You got the card effect of something that already exists for the most part. It's like one part of Ash, which is the add from deck to hand, and then you also have like kind of the Rukalos type effect where it negates the effect of something that attempts to that includes something that's special summon. So you got Impulse and also Purge. Both of these cards have restrictions on attributes, and I kind of like the direction where this is going. They're releasing really powerful cards, but they're also limiting which decks can actually play it from the hand. Like everyone can play it as a trap card, so it makes the trap card relevant. If that becomes a relevant thing, I probably would still play it. But when it comes to like activating it from the hand, that's gonna limit you on what decks you can play or which attribute that you are playing, and ultimately kind of reopens up the design space for those decks. Because right now, if you want to like look at deck building, OCG wise, they have Maxi. They have their whole little set of 10 cards they always have to play in every single deck. With the Molcharmies, it's going to change things up, and eventually the banning of Maxi is going to be like a complete blow. But things happen step at a time because right now they can play everything all together. Kind of like how we're playing, Snake Eye Fiendsmith or Fiendsmith Snake Eye with everything possible, knowing that there is a ban list coming up as well. I mean, these are like the subtle hints that we kind of just sometimes glance over or glaze over. As for the other part, the Dominus cards, it makes it so that your attributes can control which hand traps you're allowed to play, which ultimately can mean that the existing pool of hand traps are too generic, too powerful. They're at risk. So Maxi, Shifter, I would dare say even like Imperm or Veiler. I think mainly Imperm because Imperm is just like so generic. It's like these things also could be at risk of getting hit and getting replaced with future hand drops, so that you're not looking down a design where, hey, if I want to design a new archetype that's really strong, that can compete, that's aimed and designed to be tier 1, how do I make it so good in this current format? And if they look at this one right now, they have to look at all the existing hand traps, Ash, Imperm, like, oh, well, I wanted to have a one-card combo that can play through all of this stuff. And all my extenders break through all of this stuff anyway. That's how we ended with Snake Eye, right? That's what Snake Eye is. One card to break through everything. But on the other hand, they can still do something similar, but require you to have more engine in the deck. And I think that's fine too. Ultimately, I just hope that the new line of hand traps will reopen up the design space, because so I do think that, hey, there's going to be a change in the future line of hand traps of Yu-Gi-Oh! Maybe it'll be like the phase 4 of hand traps, but that's currently my thoughts on hand traps. I'd love to know your thoughts about the directions of these Molcharmies, Dominus. Maybe there's going to be even a newer series of hand traps where, we have the Ghost Girls. Maybe they make a new series that like kind of replaces the Ghost Girls. Ultimately, it's a possibility as well. I think it's not a bad idea. Or maybe they put the Ghost Girls and like some of the more dominant hand traps like kind of in a rotation of like, oh, it's a necessity for this particular format, so they'll put them at 3. It'd be kind of neat to see where things really go with hand traps. But that's all I really have to say. Are hand traps a necessary solution to a necessary problem, a product of its time, or did we kind of mess up somewhere in between? These are things that we can kind of think about. In formats with 9 to 12, people seem to be okay with them. But when we got to a format with 15 to 20 in the main deck, it feels a little tier 0. And then we get to like post side 25. Like, are we really playing Yu-Gi-Oh? Or are we just throwing cards into the graveyard? Right? You guys have seen the meme. Where do we go from here? Love to hear your thoughts about it. Thank you for listening to this guy talk about hand traps. I'm still kind of working on my big set reveal. Can't wait to show you guys in the future. But this is a topic that's been on my mind, and I want to know what you guys think about it. Is it a contributing factor to where the game has gotten? Why people aren't happy about the game? Well, let me know in the comment section. I'll see you all in the next one.